Right. I think we have had enough time of a flurry of people coming through from the waiting room into the webinar. So I'd also like just to say to everyone who is watching today, yet again, thank you for coming. I'm very excited about the panelists who are going to come, who are sharing their wisdom and knowledge with you all. This is the agenda for today, but also to say we're recording this. So if you do have to drop out or run away, you can come back and watch it at another occasion. We will be sharing this with you after the webinar with the links as well in an email. So please let us know if there are any problems or questions. So today, the way this is going to work is we're breaking the agenda into 4 main sections, but just so I make sure that all of you who have joined us understand what I'm saying, we are also very excited to say that on Zoom, you are able to turn on the captions, the translation captions at the bottom of this. So if English is not your first language, because unfortunately I'm not clever enough to speak more than one language, what you can do is go to the bottom of the Zoom bar, select the closed captions option, which is the little square box with the CC. If you click on that and then pull up to the translations, you can turn the translation captions on by sliding the button to the right. And you can then also choose which language you would like to change things into. So it means that as we talk about all of the exciting things today, you can follow along with the captions in your own language if you would like to. We're very excited about this feature. So yes, again, when we email you afterwards, it'd be great to know if you found it useful or not. So as I said, today, this is now the welcome bit. Housekeeping is done. I'm very excited to move us on to the panelist discussion where you're going to meet our 3 fantastic panelists before we enter into the longer Q&A session. Now, the Q&A session for you, we really hope that you're going to have lots of questions that you will want to ask our panelists, and you enter the questions by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, which is just to the left of your show captions button that we've just covered. And if you type your questions in there, then basically other people can look at them and you can rank them. And you can tell me who you would like those questions to go to, and we will ask those questions of our beautiful panelists, and also potentially Francesco and our other amazing colleague Laura, who's hiding in the background, if we need to. But I would hope that you put all of your exciting questions to either Hildur, Laura, or Ben. As you can see, these are our speakers for the day. I have the wonderful job of being the ringleader for this fun and games, and so I will be set with the task of keeping us to time. Now, to kick us off in spectacular style to discuss what rights we have in the workforce, I'm going to hand over to Hildur.
Thank you. So, yeah, my name is Hildur Önnudóttir, and I am the Advocacy and Campaigns Manager at Parkinson's Europe. And I am going to give a very brief overview over what international and European law says about Parkinson's and employment. And so, we start with the international level with the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which was adopted in 2006 and came into force in 2008. It is quite unique in that not only has every single EU country, along with other European countries, signed it, but the EU itself has actually signed this convention. Usually that is actually not allowed because the EU is not a country. But that is actually a different conversation. But it is unique in that way. But why does it matter? So, although a UN convention does not give the same amount of protection as a national or EU level legislation does, it does, however, have a huge impact on policies and the creation and also interpretation of legislation. EU courts have now established that when interpreting EU legislation that affects persons with disabilities, this convention needs to be taken into consideration in the interpretation. So let's look at the interpretation and down to the basics. What is a disability and what counts as discrimination against persons with disabilities? It's important to differentiate between personal identification as to whether you yourself would consider yourself a person with disability versus a definition under the law. And as you can see on the screen, the convention defines disability not just on the severity of impairments, although there needs to be an impairment and it needs to be a long-term one, but also on that interaction between that impairment and attitudinal and environmental barriers. An example of an environmental barrier would be an inaccessible building. There's no ramps or there's no lifts. In that situation, what is causing the disability is not just the impairment of the person that makes them incapable or unsafe for them to walk up the stairs, but it is the barrier in the building that there is no ramp. And taking this approach to disability, if we want to reduce disability in our communities, we can't achieve that by only preventing the progression or acquirements of impairments, although that is extremely important as well, whether they be a result of Parkinson's or another condition or an accident. But it's also about removing these attitudinal and environmental barriers in our communities. So what is discrimination? Discrimination is one of those words that sound very straightforward, but actually when you dive into it, it's actually very vague. It has been established now on the international level and the European level for 20 years that discrimination against persons with disabilities is not just about direct discrimination. Indirect discrimination is often as damaging, and I would argue even more common. So if an employer, for example, makes a blanket policy for all employees that there will be no flexible hours and work from home arrangements will stop, even though that policy applies to everyone equally, there is no words in those policies that says this is just for disabled people, this is just for the people we have that have Parkinson's. This is still discrimination because this is a policy that has a negative impact on persons with disabilities and people with Parkinson's because it does not take into account their situation, rights, and needs. And so when I say that this is an established thing for over 20 years, this is one of the examples of this. This is a EU directive from 2000. And that means that this directive has been very much transposed on all national levels. And there's a lot of legal precedent about how to interpret it, etc., etc. This actually predates the UN Convention. The directive, it covers equal treatment in general. That includes gender and ethnicity and various other protected characteristics. However, it is very important for people with Parkinson's and people with other disabilities because it established on the EU level that people with disabilities have the right to reasonable accommodations in order to achieve equal treatment in the workplace. And so there it is recognized and put into law that, again, is not just enough to say, well, as long as you can perform and do everything in the exact same way as everybody else, then that we're not discriminating. No, when there is a disability in play, there's also the right to reasonable accommodations. Now, I'm not going to go into a deep dive into what is reasonable, what isn't, and what kind of accommodations are used, because we actually have a lot of excellent information on that on the website of Parkinson's Europe. And that will be shared with you after the webinar, and that would also be available on the platforms where we will upload the webinar. But if there is one thing that I want people to take from my presentation today, is that asking an employer for reasonable accommodations is not asking for charity or kindness. It is claiming a legal right that has been established now for 20 years on the European, international, and national level. It is no different than taking maternity leave or using your legally protected number of vacation days. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Hildur. That was brilliant. And I think that summary should really resonate, hopefully, with everybody about the thing of it's not a nice to have. It's actually a right that you have. And I'm very excited that we're going to move on now to Laura Cockram, who is head of campaigns at Parkinson's UK, who will give us some more examples of the things that she's been involved with. Hildur, are you all right to drive the slides in the background like magic train driver for Laura? I will pass you over to Laura to introduce herself even more.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for inviting me along today. And I'm Laura, and I head up the campaigns at Parkinson's UK. If you can flick onto the next slide, please, Hilda, that'd be grand. And the next one, that would be lovely. Thanks. So today I'll cover what we hear and know about Parkinson's and work, and also the offer that we've got for people with Parkinson's, employers and the government. So just a quick kind of whistle-stop tour of Parkinson's UK. We were founded in 1969 by Marley Jenkins, whose sister had Parkinson's, and we were predominantly focused on information and support at the start of our journey. But our information and support offer has really developed over the last couple of years. Apologies if you can hear my dog. He's having a little bit of a play around. I knew it was going to happen. Sorry. But yeah, so we have a website with lots of information about living with the condition, and also for carers and care partners. But we also have lots of publications, and this one's on work. We have a helpline, and we have local advisors, over 80 of them across the whole of the UK, and over 360 local groups across the UK that provide support for people with Parkinson's, care partners. So that's peer support, exercise, singing, and different activities as well. We're also the largest European funder of Parkinson's research from cause to a cure. And about 10 years ago, we were inspired really by the ParkNet example of partnering with the health service. And we partner with the health service in the UK, or the health services in the UK, because there are 4 across the UK. So we partner with the NHS, and we've developed a network of health and care professionals who are really committed to driving up the quality of care for people with Parkinson's. We fund posts in the NHS to, again, drive up the quality of care. And we also produce learning and resources for healthcare professionals, whether that's Parkinson's specialists or generalists across the health service. We support over 4,000 volunteers in a whole variety of different roles, so either at the branches and groups that I talked about, or campaigning volunteers, or those that develop the learning for health and care professionals, or those that even get involved in assessing our research grants, and also lots of fundraising volunteers as well, because we couldn't continue to operate if we didn't have that income coming in. And also we campaign to improve healthcare and transport services. Hildur, could you flick onto the next slide, please? Thanks. So I'm not going to talk through this. This is an opportunity for you to get a sense of some of the comments that people with Parkinson's have shared with us around work. But we did some work in 2017 with with Sheffield Hallam University, and much like the Parkinson's Europe research that has been shared over the last kind of day or so, we know that people with Parkinson's are losing out. And the survey that we did or the research that we did in 2017 with Sheffield Hallam showed that in the UK, because of additional health costs, reduced hours, unpaid caring, the loss of state benefits, and people with Parkinson's maybe having to give up work early, or carers having to give up work early because of the condition, that people were losing out. And we've adjusted that to inflation rates, and it's a whopping £15,325 that a household with somebody who lives with Parkinson's will lose out because of the condition. So the comments on the slide really come from a survey that we did in 2019, and whilst it was a number of years ago, I think the comments on the slide again really echo the survey that Parkinson's Europe have again just shared. What we found is that as someone's condition progresses and the symptoms are more difficult to deal with, people do move away from the workforce. It's gradual at first. Certainly very, very quickly after diagnosis, it's kind of gradual, but then maybe after 5 years or more, there's a significant move away from the workforce. Respondents to our survey noted that getting to and from work was actually quite stressful, particularly because if their symptoms weren't controlled, then they felt very embarrassed, and also they felt embarrassed of their symptoms when they were with colleagues, and that resulted in increased anxiety, which we already know is an issue with Parkinson's. The majority of respondents told us that their employer, that they told their employer about their diagnosis, but some waited 3 to 6 months after their diagnosis because they really didn't understand the impact on their condition or their life at that point. So they wanted to get a better understanding before they shared it with their employer. What was really good, though, is that in our survey, 3/4 of those who were still in work felt supported by their employer, which is really great to hear. And Hildur talking a moment ago about reasonable accommodations or reasonable adjustments, as we call them in the UK. And in actual fact, 4 in 10 of those employers actually went out and found out more information about the condition themselves. They were proactive, which is really important. We've got a scheme in the UK that helps people with disabilities to stay in work. It's called Access to Work. And what we found is that 2/3 of people who responded to the survey were aware of access to work, but only 10% actually took it up. So that's something that is a real call for me, is that if you do need assistance, there will probably be government schemes. So do ask about that, so you can benefit from those. Half of the respondents in work when they completed the survey said that they wanted to retire early on health grounds because they felt unable to continue working at that same kind of level that they had been working at. And although many wanted to kind of continue working as long as they could, because Parkinson's wasn't something that they had in their plans. They didn't know it was coming, and so it was a surprise diagnosis, and they need to save more money in order to help with care later on. And a lot of them said that they couldn't actually afford to retire early, which I think is clearly a concern. And then those who completed the survey but weren't in work at the time actually shared that it was more difficult to get into work after their diagnosis, because employers had a poor view of Parkinson's, or maybe didn't have an accurate view of Parkinson's and the support that they would need to provide. Hildur, if you can pop on to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. So just to kind of look at our offer to people with Parkinson's, and some of them I've kind of touched on already. Obviously, we've got our website that has a whole host of information, but we also have an online forum as well, where people with Parkinson's care partners can go and share their issues, their queries, their questions, and we also, have social media channels and platforms and groups where, again, people can do that within the confines of a safe space. As I mentioned, we've got printed information, we have our helpline and advisors, and about 10 years ago, actually, we developed a new role in the organisation called a benefit and employment advisor, and they're more specialist advisors, because the benefit system in the UK is getting more and more complex, and also we're hearing from more people who are having issues in terms of employment. So those benefit and employment advisors provide support on a whole variety of different employment issues. So whether somebody should disclose their condition, equality and disability discrimination, about maybe suggestions around reasonable adjustments for an employer, about resignation and retirement, and what the potential advice could be and support around that. If people have been dismissed because of their Parkinson's, maybe getting more information about access to work, but also benefit options as well if somebody does have to reduce their hours. We don't, however, represent people at employment tribunals or help out with settlement agreements. That's more legally kind of based, and so we would signpost people to legal remedies there. As I mentioned, we've got local support groups, but something that we've started over the past 3 or 4 years is, when people are newly diagnosed, is to hold webinars similar to what we're doing today, and we have them on very specific topics. We recognise that people who are newly diagnosed might still be in the workplace, but obviously a lot of them will maybe slightly older in age, and so maybe not in the workplace. We also have a program called First Steps, which is after maybe 6 to 12 months after diagnosis, and it's a program that's been developed with people with Parkinson's, and it's delivered by people with Parkinson's, and it's an online series of sessions. But we recognise that not everybody wants to do things online, and so we also have a workbook that people can independently kind of work through themselves. I know that Ben is going to be talking more about the Fighting Fit programme, which we now support, but it started in the southeast of England, still is there at the moment, and is very much a weekend kind of residential, and we're supporting it, and it's certainly something that I think other regions of the UK are kind of looking at, and particularly the southwest, I think, at the moment are looking at rolling something similar out. In terms of employment, employers and government, what we tend to provide is lots of information about Parkinson's, as I've said, in terms of our website, our publications, and also our helpline. But we also provide specific learning on Parkinson's that can really help employers. It can also help government departments who are assessing people for benefits, and private companies who are assessing people for benefits and support to learn more about the condition. And work that we are doing as well is raising issues that the community share with us, with the government, with the Department for Work and Pensions, which is where the government policy around employment and benefits is developed, but also with ministers and the government directly. So that's the work that we do around kind of employment. I don't know, Hildur, if you just want to pop onto the next slide. And if you do have any questions or you do want to get in contact, then don't hesitate to get in contact. My details are there. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. And that was epically done, in the fact that there is so much that Parkinson's UK have put together over the years that you've managed to squeeze it spectacularly into 10 minutes, which I think is an achievement in itself. So thank you so much. I'm very excited to move on now to our last panelist, our last speaker, Ben, who, yes, is going to be talking to us about Fighting Fit, but actually is just going to share with us his story. So Hildur, I'm going to ask you to stop sharing now so that we actually get Ben's full face on the screen. Once
Sure, that improves things.
I think it makes everything very spectacular. Personally, I am a big fan. And I just want to say, firstly, Ben, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I know that, everyone has reasons for why they wouldn't share stories, especially when it's talking about things in employment. But I would love you, if you wouldn't mind, just to share your Parkinson's story with our wonderful audience, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, thanks. So I'm 57 now. I was diagnosed when I was 50 in 2019, so a bit pre-pandemic. The symptoms I had at the time were fatigue, stiffness, I limped a fair bit, and there was the beginnings of apathy. I was working full time, had been for a while. I was 2.5 hours a day of commuting and then a 10-hour day in the office. It was intense and fun and I enjoyed it, but I wasn't as good at it as I used to be. And with hindsight, I think that was Parkinson's. Long story short, I ended up in front of a neurologist for something else that I thought was carpal tunnel syndrome. And he said, no, you haven't got that. But while you're here, and I ended up having a DAT scan diagnosed July 2019. Impact on work. The company I worked for was a big, established financial services organisation. So the rights of people with disabilities are well embedded in the HR policies. So I actually told them the day after I was diagnosed, I went back into the office and said, boss, here's the situation. He asked me the very reasonable question, so what do you need from us? How can we help? I had no idea. And I think this is one of the things that's really difficult with Parkinson's, is because it's so different. Each of us gets it differently and it changes over time. When asked the reasonable question, what do you need us to do to help you? I didn't know, couldn't possibly know. So we took it gradually. They were very accommodating, very supportive. I used a lot of flexibility around working hours. I ended up working from home pretty much full time. That increased over the period since diagnosis. I ended up eventually agreeing a reduction in my responsibilities such that I could go down to a 3-day week from full time. All of this making time in my diary for things like exercising and all the stuff we need to do with Parkinson's. I often think having Parkinson's is a part-time job in and of itself. So they were great. I never regretted telling them. Eventually I retired, so that was July this year I finished. So I'd done 6 odd years post-diagnosis. And I think that was good. I think Parkinson's, when you're told you have it, when you're diagnosed, it undermines a bit your idea of who you are, and you wonder, well, who am I now? What does that mean? Still having work to cling on to, which gives you such a large sort of who you are, a purpose, a reason for getting out of bed in the morning, that really helped. And then I think the second thing was Parkinson's. As you get to know it and you get to know other people with the disease, it becomes quite a big bit of your life, big bit of your social life, big bit of what you think about. And I found as I came to the end of my career, it filled a gap, I think. It made it easier to stop working because there was Parkinson's. It was, the social activity around it and the exercise and the groups I do exercise with and the social life. We're going to fill some of that gap. So it's been an interesting transition, but a gradual one. So that answer the question, Amelia?
That is beautiful. And I when we were talking before, because we did do a slight bit of like getting to know each other, it was really interesting hearing you talk about choice and how you felt like actually you had choices, but it was only because your manager kept on coming back to you and asking, and you had like one question that you would highly recommend.
Yeah, it seems to me, I'd have a regular conversation with my boss every sort of 3 or 4 months. He would informally say, "How's it going? How are you? What do you need from us?" And it struck me that what I really needed was a 2 or 3 sentence answer to the question, "How are you?" Because I can talk for a couple of hours about how I am. With Parkinson's, yeah, there's a smorgasbord of entertaining symptoms we could discuss. That's not the question he was asking. What he meant was, is there anything we need to do to help? So
Yeah.
if you ask now, how are you? Well, I get tired. I don't have the stamina I used to have. Other than that, I'm fine, thank you. So what can we do? Well, we can flex on working hours. If you need to take time out for appointments, that's fine. Just make sure your diary's marked up so that people know when you're around and when you're not around. It's fine. So I think having that sort of regular dialogue, but being clear in the dialogue what you want from them.
Absolutely. And I think that then shows it as a collaboration rather than a one doing to the other. And yet again, I think what really resonated with me when we were talking about this is how things change over time. Even in a day, let alone in a couple of months, about what you need or what support you might want is it's always changing. And it seems fantastic to be able to feel confident in that conversation with that person that they understand that.
Yeah, I'm conscious I was very lucky. Partly because of the organisation I was working for, partly because of the person I was reporting to. I think I can easily imagine other situations, other employers where it might be harder, and people have just got to make that judgment themselves. You know the culture of the organisation you're working for. You know how well you do or don't get on with your boss and how they're likely to react. So I don't think there's a one size fits all. But fundamentally, while the employer has an obligation, as Hildur pointed out, they have obligations towards you. It's got to be a bit of give and take. These are people, and the organisation has a function to deliver for its shareholders and its customers and so on. It can't all be about your needs. So a bit of give and take and a bit of debate. So examples, which days a week I worked when I was working part-time. I changed week by week depending on what was going on at work. So I was doing 3 days, but it might be different days off, different weeks. And I think I would probably left to my own devices. I'd have stopped work 6, 7 months earlier than I did. But for the organisation, that would have been pretty inconvenient. So, I waited while we sorted out the succession plan and had everything handed over and everything was smooth. So I think a bit of give and take is quite important.
Fantastic, thank you. And then, so we mentioned the Fighting Fit course. Could you share with us why you joined Fighting Fit, what you did while you were on the course, how you felt it benefited you?
Yeah, and the first thing was it solved a big problem, which was which glamorous location should my wife and I go on summer holiday to. And we, instead of all the glamorous things you might do for summer holiday, we had 3 days in Cookham. And Cookham's a lovely village on the River Thames, but it's not what you do for a glamorous holiday. So Fighting Fit as a programme is 2 or 3 days residential. There are about 20 of us on there as delegates. all with PD, all relatively recently diagnosed. It's a mix of information provision, so people who know what they're talking about coming in and broadcasting at you. So we had a nutritionist, we had a neurophysio, and we had medics who could talk about medication and the options and so on. So there was some information provision. There were a bunch of activities to break that up. So we did dance. I'm a lousy dancer, but we did dance after a fashion. We did Nordic walking. We did drumming, which is brilliant. And then there are a series of discussion opportunities where you sort of chat with other people, talk about what you'd learned, what your aims were, what you wanted to know more about. And there was a load of socialising in the evening. So you sort of come out of it. The key things I took out were the importance of hard aerobic exercise as a tool for people with PD, which is a bit manna from heaven. I already enjoyed exercise. This was a license to do more. The importance of diet. The other thing I took was the diversity of people's experience. It was really interesting talking to other people about how they experienced Parkinson's and the range of different symptoms and what their diagnosis journey had been like and how they'd worked around it and stuff. It's the benefit of talking to other people I found was great. And off the back of that came a social group. So that original Fighting Fit cohort I was in 5-6 years ago now still gets together a couple of times a year.
Fantastic. In exotic locations still?
No, afraid not.
But it really that really helped you, that kind of essence of going and doing that learning in sort of a condensed way and then building a community.
Yeah, and I think the thing I take from it was it reinforced the idea that was a bit dodgy phrase. You have agency.
Yeah.
Parkinson's isn't something you just sit back and it happens to you. You can change it. You can change the way it impacts you. So that's a stoic philosophy thing. You can't control your circumstances, but you can control the way you react to them, and you can make it better for yourself.
Definitely. So basically, they taught you a bit of philosophy on the course as well, or is that just a personal leaning to stoicism?
It's a personal leaning, but I think it's the essence of the course.
Absolutely. And was there anyone else who was on the course who was still in work at the same time as you were?
Yeah, lots. I think probably half was still working.
Yeah. And are some of them still working, do you know, or has everyone sort of retired now? What's the...
I haven't done the stats on that. I think quite a few of us have stopped, and from talking to people, it depends at what stage you get diagnosed. But if you're diagnosed in your 50s, working for 5-6 years seems quite normal. If you're diagnosed in your 30s and you've got school-age kids to support, well, clearly it's a different story. I was lucky; our kids were still at university when I was diagnosed, but are now financially off our hands. So which makes the decision to stop work that much easier. I think it's one of the great imponderables. It's probably something that Parkinson's UK could help a bit with, is the financial planning aspects of the disease. You've got to be realistic about what you can do, but you can't shut your eyes to the financial impact of it.
Absolutely not. And I think that's what was really interesting that Laura touched on before, is that £15,000 loss of income in a household is huge, absolutely huge. And also, I suppose, as you pointed out, everyone has their own set of symptoms, their own journey, and what they're kind of dealing with in terms of being able to tolerate, still being part of the working world while also managing where they are. Like, one of the things we chatted about, because when you told me you used to do 12-hour days and also a 3-hour commute, I almost fell over. I was like, how did you even sustain that into your 50s? I mean, for me, I'm like, I don't think I could do it today. And was that part of what, did Parkinson's change that kind of perspective of what you could work as? And actually, what was really interesting, you sort of said no, it wasn't the Parkinson's that changed like how much longer you were actually going to work for.
I'd always intended to retire at some point in my 50s. Yeah, mid to late 50s was the game plan. If you'd asked me when I was 25, when are you going to retire, oh yeah, 55 would be great. And I think I'd probably stuck around a bit longer.
Yeah.
But it didn't radically change the plan for me. I was lucky. But
Yeah.
the industry in which I worked, the cretinous working hours, generally fueled by caffeine. There's an adrenaline buzz to it.
Oh, absolutely. And this is probably why you love all the sports and the drumming and all the things that you do, is it's all in there. But interestingly, caffeine's potentially supposed to be neuroprotective. So maybe it was all of that caffeine that got you to where you were. Who knows? It's good fun science, that.
Well, yeah, it is neuroprotective, but it also has benefits on your digestive tract, I have found. But I'll not be more explicit than that on a public website.
Thank you so much. I mean, it definitely tells you're very good at being in a team. Thank you so much, Manny. It's been really fascinating hearing about your journey and the benefits of fighting fit. And we're now getting on to the Q&A element of today's session. And I'm really pleased to say that we have 2 questions already sitting in my Q&A box. The first one I'm going to go for is actually not a question, it's a comment from Kathy. When I was still working, a couple of colleagues said to me that changes we had made to accommodate me also benefited them as they were neurodiverse. Ben, did you notice that some of the accommodations that were made with you in mind actually might have benefited your people you were passing things over to as you were retiring, changing the culture a little bit?
Almost the other way round, in that the organisation for which I worked had a lot of focus on groups of employees with different characteristics, and there was a big focus and a lot of work around neurodiversity. So when I got diagnosed, I was pretty confident the organisation was going to behave sensibly. And yeah, I was fairly open with colleagues about why it was I was going down to part-time and stuff. It was an easy conversation to have.
Amazing, thank you. And I just think that's really interesting because, Hildur started off the tone of this talking about disability, and I don't think we often talk about the term disability linked with Parkinson's as much. And I think it is good to understand that it is interlinked. Parkinson's is a movement disorder, and actually disabilities focus a lot on what we see, externally as movement challenges, especially in a lot of legal settings. And actually, I'm going to go to this second question I have here, and I think this comes to you, Hildur, and then I'll come back to you, Ben. Actually, Hildur and Laura, I think this will be a good one for both of you. I am a diplomat. When applying for jobs internally, do you think it would be possible to complain about discrimination if I'm not selected? After all, a healthy person will be better at, say, walking and talking. Any experience with that? Hildur, I'll come to you first, and then Laura, I'm sure you've got some experience of that.
Yeah. So there are kind of 2 dynamics to that. Is it wrong? Is it like legally wrong? And can it be proven? So I'm gonna address the legal issue first, although I will put a disclaimer that don't take legal advice specifically from me, because I only have more of the international European level. For direct legal advice for your situation, please consult a lawyer in your national level. The fact that if a person is a diplomat should not change the matter at all. So there are a few professions which are exempt in the EU directive, and you will see also in similar laws outside of the EU similar. So the one is the military. Another is the police. You will often also see exemptions for medical professionals and also aviation. And this is, of course, for safety. It is okay to say that a pilot that doesn't have a good enough vision is not fit to work. That is not discrimination. That is a safety issue. The civil service is not exempt. The state is not exempt from its own laws. And in fact, if you look at comments from the Committee of the Rights of Disabilities, when they evaluate countries, one of the things that they ask about employment is, well, why are you as the state not hiring more disabled people? Like if you're trying to say, oh, we're trying to convince the private sector to hire disabled people, why aren't you doing it? Being a diplomat, then there's also a difference between legal issues with being a posted worker, etc., which is why I would, for a really specific way of how you would go about complaining and saying this, seek that advice out. There will also most likely be internal processes. And then there is the question of disclosing before applying or during the application process. And those are all very kind of specific questions, but sort of short story. The fact that you work in the civil service, even though it is in the foreign ministry of your country, does not change the law. But I would advise seeking specific consultation, either contact Parkinson's organization in your country, or also there are, because this is disability rights law, lawyers that specialize in employment law and disability rights law. You can contact those disability rights organizations. They will often have contacts for people who are particularly good at that.
Thank you, Hildur. I think that's really comprehensive for our European, mainland Europe audience. Laura, was there anything you wanted to add from a Parkinson's UK perspective or a UK perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I see this as if you're already an internal member of staff and maybe the organisation already knows about your condition, then I would certainly in my perspective, and I think this has happened for a couple of people with Parkinson's who we've supported as well. They've spoken to the line manager of the job, if you like, the new job, and they've checked in with them before they've made an application to understand the role a bit better, to get a sense of whether there could be adjustments or accommodations that are made before an application goes in. I mean, I guess, as Hildur says, it's maybe not straight away make a complaint, if you like. It's trying to understand if there has been discrimination, and you could always, seek feedback. And if you're not happy with the feedback, once you've maybe gone through the kind of the recruitment process, is you could always, put a complaint in afterwards. So I wouldn't suggest complaint straight away. I would certainly think about what you do in advance of the recruitment, so that you can or the interview, so that you can be properly prepared, and they can the employer can also make sure that they are preparing to give you really the best opportunity to perform well. But then, as Hildur says, is kind of seek some support if you are going to make a complaint, so that you have the right documentation and evidence. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That's amazing. And I think it's really helpful to talk about these things as the specifics. I have a couple of questions directed back at Ben now. Ben, how long into your 6-year working life with Parkinson's did you drop to 3 days a week? And what was the trigger for you making that change? And I'm going to double up on questions in this. They're just really naughty of me. But I think there's another one that's very interesting about if any NHS staff discussed remaining in work and reasonable adjustments with you, because I feel like maybe they pair together a little bit.
A bit, yeah. To keep it easy for my brain, I'm going to answer them one after the other. But well, I was going to, but it just disappeared off the screen. So.
Oh, sorry. So sorry. When did you?
Yeah, so it's all right. I'm fine. So I went down to 3 days a week at the beginning of this year. So I'd done 6 years full time, and then I went down to 3 days a week. And I think Ray wanted to know what the catalyst for that change was.
Yes.
And it was, I initiated it basically, and started the conversation with the organisation back end of last year and said I'd like to drop down. And the rationale for that was the list of other things I wanted to do was getting longer and longer and longer. And I thought, well, if I know I'm going to retire, I'd like to start fading into that retirement life. So rather than being 5 days a week and then big black line and being utterly retired, I thought it would be easier for me and to some extent easier for the organisation if we did it gradually. So that was the thinking. It was a conscious, I'm going to drop down as part of my preparation for retirement. In terms of the conversation with the NHS staff, yes, it came up in conversation with the Parkinson's nurse. I probably shouldn't name her in a live webinar, but she's brilliant. Dry sense of humour, takes no nonsense from anyone. She's great. And she said, are you going to carry on working? This was sort of early on. And I said, yes. And she said, good, you should keep going. But as I was finding the fatigue building and it's harder and harder to do what I wanted to do at work, she was a useful sounding board about what I might do about that and how to approach it. Just to check in. I think the role of the Parkinson's nurse in the NHS setup, frankly, I get much more from the conversations with the nurse than I do with the conversations with the neurologist. Now, maybe over time that'll change, and in 10 years' time, if I've had DBS or anything, clearly maybe different. But so far, I think it's that sort of practical, how are you dealing with the disease, that helps much, much more. So PD nurse and I discussed, And I also discussed at length with my wife, my long-suffering wife.
Always good.
Make it work.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ben. And I think it really resonates with me in the fact of the Parkinson's nurse holding such an important role within that knowledge sharing pathway while you're coming to terms and getting used to things and having possibilities put in front of you. And it's really important. Now we've only got 5 minutes left for the webinar, and I'm going to do my best to jump through these questions as best we can. I'm going to start with Lara's question about one important aspect of Parkinson's care is maintaining independence and participation in work life. I'm not sure if you know, but in your experience, for those using advanced treatments like deep brain stimulation, has this made it easier to stay in the workplace, or have there been new challenges? Now, doing a little bit of a brain search, I do know that the average age of DBS is 60 to 61. And as we're talking about people staying in the workforce, I don't think we've necessarily deep dived into that information about what it means when people move on to more advanced therapies in terms of their personal experience, and if that actually does make them more functional in the workplace. However, if you'd love a good story about someone who's experienced keeping involved, doing work, Matt Eagles is a good person to go and have a chat with. But I can't answer that beyond saying we just haven't looked into it yet. But it's a great question to ask, Lara. Thank you very much. Underneath that, Hugo, you say you worked several years after receiving the info that you had Parkinson's, Ben. Hugo's from Belgium and has worked for 7 years like you after being diagnosed with Parkinson's. Worked for 3 years of 50%, and at the time, a boss told me I could stay home and still be paid like last year. So I did it for 2 years, and now I am retiring from 2 years. Do you know from people who could stay home like me without working and still be paid, Ben? And Ben, if you don't have the answer, then I'm wondering if I can ping that very quickly to Hildur.
I think it depends a bit employer by employer. But certainly when I went part-time, my salary reflected that. So when I went 3 days a week, I was paid 60% of what I'd previously been paid. Hugo sounds like he had a sweet deal.
Okay. But I think there's something to be said there about appreciating, should we say, an employer meeting you where you need to be. But I do know Belgium law is slightly more complicated, especially in terms of
Yes.
stuff. Hildur, if you can summarize something in 1 minute for Hugo, that would be fantastic, or just point a direction that Hugo can have a further conversation.
Well, to have further conversation, I would definitely advise Hugo to get himself into contact with the Parkinson's organizations we have in Belgium. I think this particular situation reflects also Belgian employment law. It is very difficult to let people go. There are also, and this was so initiatives like what Laura talked about advice about navigating social benefit systems, because those are complicated across Europe. In Belgium, we have a system where you can be on medical part-time, and that essentially means that your health insurance meets you halfway, so your income goes down and so on. And in Belgium, I know it's very complicated. Some things you get from the federal state, sometimes from your local, sometimes from your insurance. So please, if you are in that situation, you're worried about finance, contact your national Parkinson's organization. If that is not an option, if there is not a national organization, don't hesitate to contact also general disability organizations, and make sure that you are accessing everything that you are entitled to.
Amazing. Thank you, Hildur. And yes, there is information about accessing the Belgium organisations on our website, which will be shared with you afterwards. So thank you. Got one last comment from Jeanette, which is about the diplomatic question. Just to help top up that answer, it would depend also on where the post is. Some hardship posts and posts outside Europe are not really suitable, and the employer cannot guarantee the conditions. So that's that.
Yeah.
I am so sorry we've run out of time, Yolanda, to answer your question, but we will try and type an answer to your question. I just wanted to say thank you so much to our amazing panelists. I hope you've all enjoyed, found today really informative, really interesting, and gone away with a bit more knowledge when you started with. If you would like to hear more from us, please, please, please do go and join our engagement network. It's a call to action network, which is all about sharing opportunities with you. And Francesco, very clever in the background, has put that in the chat so that you should be able to see that link. But we will be circulating it via email later as well. And if you just want some general news and hearing what else we're up to and other campaigns that we might be doing, sign up to our normal newsletter as well. That will also be circulated in the meeting, after this webinar, in the email that will get sent out to you. As I said at the beginning, this has been recorded, and so you will have access to this recording to watch back if there are nuggets of information that you gleaned from this. But I would like to say, again, thank you so much to my fantastic panelists, Laura, Hildur, and Ben. This has been a wonderful webinar. You've all been spectacular. Thank you for the questions, and we look forward to hearing from you all soon. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.